Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, and I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. And it is take two for the NG-21, Northrop Grumman 21 mission, sending up a Cygnus spacecraft on its way to begin a 2-day journey to the International Space Station. You're looking live right now at the Falcon 9 rocket, continuing to stand tall at Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We are currently T-minus 1 hour, 28 minutes, 4 seconds and counting to the planned launch of this Falcon 9 flight. As has been the case yesterday, and of course continues to be the case with this and every launch, they are keeping a close eye on the weather. Coming into today's launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast just a 10% chance of favorable conditions at liftoff. However, good news on that front as of right now, and obviously I'll couch this with the asterisks of things can change, and it is Florida in August, but at the moment the weather is green, so there are, again, as of right now, currently no weather constraints to launch. So we're less than 30 minutes away from the start of propellant load for today's mission, assuming that everything else is in good shape to move forward with that part of the operation. Our photographer, Michael Kane, is getting in position, getting ready to shoot the rocket this morning. Our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs are also providing tracking assistance as well. Our Adam Bernstein has the morning off, though. May see him pop into the live chat alongside our wonderful moderators. I see Callistia Lee, Stephanie B, back up with us again. Appreciate the two of you and your stalwart troopedness, I suppose. Not really a word, but you get my drift. Appreciate you being back with us after the early morning launch of a Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base. For those who were not with us for that launch coverage, that was the Starlink 11-1 mission, which successfully sent up 23 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit. We are powered, of course, by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube, so thanks to folks like Nerd in Space, Paz Maria H, Zeus's Mommy, Ralph Kilcup, Florida Girl, Debbie Sunset. I believe I saw Butterfly somewhere this morning. Eric Scott, Justin Dawson, Donald Trammell, and many others. Good morning to you all. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our launch coverage moments from here at the Cape in 4K. Want to thank Sulfur for Lunch for upgrading or joining us with channel membership, I should say, at the Mission Specialist level. And I'll note for all of our channel members at the Mission Specialist level on up, we do have a new Discord available for you all. We're still in beta mode, so learning, adding, changing things, but those at the Mission Specialist level and higher for channel membership have full access to that Discord, which currently includes things like a behind-the-scenes room, a special place for launch photos from our photographers, and again, we're looking at adding different things to that Discord, and certainly welcome your feedback, thoughts, and recommendations. So hop on over there when you get a chance, take a look around, and tell us what you think. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question that is appropriate to be read on the show and would like to be a part of our broadcast this morning, and of course that extends to our channel members as well, we'll be keeping an eye out on our super chats here on YouTube. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and we greatly appreciate it. Last but not least, the best way you can help us out, and this applies to everyone here, is if you just hit that like button. It's quick, easy, simple to do, and free, of course, as well. Allows the YouTube algorithm to recognize that folks are here and interacting, and it'll bring more people to this live coverage, and that would be greatly appreciated. We're currently T-minus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. For those who were not with us, the first go-around of the launch attempt of the Cygnus spacecraft. Here's a brief overview. We appreciate NASA for pulling together some of these graphics and sharing them with the community. As the name of this mission implies, this will be the 21st Cygnus flight up to the International Space Station. Cygnus spacecraft is important not only because it can bring science and cargo up to the ISS for the astronauts on board and to help bolster some of the things happening on the space station, but it can also help boost the station itself. And so while it is docked to the ISS, it will be used periodically for boosting capabilities in addition to the Progress vehicle on the Russian side of the station. And of course, because the Cygnus does not return to Earth in its entirety, as the SpaceX Dragon does, when the Cygnus departs, the crew on board can load it up with trash and everything that is not currently needed and will fit on a Cygnus and send it on its merry way. And the Cygnus spacecraft is designed to burn up in the atmosphere during re-entry so that debris will not make it to the ground. So a few different important functions of the Cygnus. This is the second out of 3 planned flights of a Cygnus spacecraft on board a Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in 2022, the availability of the main engine that powered the Antares 230 rocket became no longer available to Northrop Grumman, and so they are working in partnership with Firefly Aerospace on building the Antares 330 rocket, which will fly for a bit and then ultimately be replaced by the medium launch vehicle, which is also being developed in partnership with Firefly and Northrop Grumman jointly. What that means in relation to this mission and the next time we see a Cygnus fly is that they will fly atop a Falcon 9 rocket, and then ultimately they will transition back to launching on a Northrop Grumman provided vehicle, again in partnership with Firefly Aerospace. Those launches will take place from pad up at NASA's Wallops Island facilities there in Virginia. No definitive timeline for it just yet, but they, broadly speaking, anticipate being able to resume Cygnus launches from Wallops in 2025. currently T-minus 1 hour, 17 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. Again, as we're continuing to track the weather conditions for the Falcon 9 flight today, things are trending generally in a better direction, although we are continuing to keep an eye on some storm cells that are off to our south and traveling in a slightly northeasterly trajectory towards the pad at the Cape. The latest from the National Weather Service in Melbourne, which is the closest NWS outpost to us, notes, and I'll quote them here, they say, quote, increasing squalls from Debbie today, especially in the afternoon. Primary storm impacts are gusts in the squalls 40 to 50 miles per hour, few as high as 60 miles per hour, lightning strikes, torrential downpours. Expect a quick storm motion to the north, high risk of dangerous rip currents, breezy/gusty today. Now, just to couch that in relation to the launch that we have ahead of us, as you just heard from the National Weather Service, much of that activity is really going to be picking up in the afternoon time frame. So given the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket is targeting 11:02 a.m. Eastern, 15:02 UTC for our friends around the world, that may be far enough ahead to not be the greatest impact, and currently weather still remains green on the board. However, conditions are shifting, and we will keep you apprised of developments as they come on the weather front. Currently T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. Coming back to the payload on board the Falcon 9 rocket, here's a breakdown of what's inside the Cygnus spacecraft. Again, appreciate NASA for the graphic assistance here. See the separation based on crew supplies, the science investigations that are heading up, spacewalk equipment, vehicle hardware, and computer resources. A good chunk of that science that's heading up to the station with this mission is sponsored by the ISS National Lab, which is based here on Florida's Space Coast, and assuming all remains on track with this mission, in just a little bit we'll be speaking with a representative of the ISS National Lab, our friend Pat O'Neill. And so we'll be bringing that live interview to you in roughly 15 or 20 minutes. Once this mission launches, the Cygnus spacecraft will take approximately 2 days to reach its destination, the International Space Station. When it does, these are the two astronauts who will be tasked with monitoring the arrival and controlling the Canadarm for capture and berthing. NASA astronaut Matt Dominic will be behind the controls of the Canadarm, and NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps will be monitoring the progress of the Cygnus. As far as what we're anticipating with the countdown timeline, it is what we've all come to expect with a Falcon 9 launch, but of course every launch could be someone's first, so we never want to assume that folks know what we're going to be anticipating here. So let's go ahead and run through the countdown timeline for this flight today. Things get going at the T-minus 38-minute mark when the conclusion of the poll is taken and the SpaceX launch director verifies the go for prop load. Of course, that happens electronically, so if SpaceX feels like they're in a good position to move ahead with that poll, they can take it a little bit earlier. Fueling starts at the T-minus 35-minute mark with a loading of liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's first stage and RP-1, or rocket-grade kerosene, on board both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 30-minute mark, they begin loading cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Process happens again on the second stage, starting at the T-minus 26-minute mark. T-minus 23 minutes, the loading of second stage kerosene wraps up. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, they begin thermally conditioning the feed lines of the pad in preparation for second stage LOX load. It gets underway at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, but we'll see the visual evidence of it about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds for the so-called big vent. That said, the last few launches we've seen, the big vent has been happening slightly earlier by about 7 to 10 seconds. So don't be thrown if it happens around T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. And then, as we indicated, second stage LOX load begins at T-minus 16 minutes. Moving right along, 7 minutes before liftoff, the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines gets underway. The process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. It helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. A minute later, second stage LOX load concludes. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. The final 60 seconds control the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before liftoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command. The hold down clamps will release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. Again, today with an instantaneous launch opportunity that is 11:02 a.m. Currently T minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 24 seconds and counting. See some folks chatting in our live chat and asking about the weather conditions. Currently, we are still green for weather, so no current weather violations as of, again, this moment in time. But as one of our moderators, Callistially, noted in the chat, this is Florida in August, and there is a tropical storm which will develop into a hurricane off the Bayside coast. So conditions may change, but we are continuing to track towards a launch attempt in just over an hour from now. So unless or until they call the ball game, we will continue to proceed with this countdown. And of course, we will keep you apprised with any relevant updates. As we come into the 1 hour mark, I want to thank the more than 1,300 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us and allow some more folks to find their way into our live coverage. And we are now T minus 59 minutes, 55 seconds and counting, less than an hour to the planned launch of the Cygnus spacecraft on the NG-21 mission. Northrop Grumman's 21st launch of a Cygnus spacecraft up to the International Space Station. For just now joining us, I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now, and I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We do have an update from SpaceX now that we've crossed through the 1 hour mark. They note that, quote, teams are continuing to monitor the weather, which is now 35% favorable for liftoff. So while not the most ideal conditions one could hope for, that is still a market improvement over the 10% odds of favorable weather that we were looking at coming into today's launch opportunity. So again, trending better. In addition, the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center has put out word that they have activated their launch operations support team in preparation for this mission. So the pieces are coming together for this launch opportunity. And so we'll continue to watch the weather and hold out hope that things are trending in a good direction, and will continue to do so as SpaceX is now just about 20 minutes away from making the call on the start of propellant load. As we noted during our launch coverage yesterday, if SpaceX is unable to launch today, they have a 24-hour, or they don't have a 24-hour backup opportunity for Monday. Reason for that being this is a mission to the ISS, and therefore there are some fresher items on board that will need to be refreshed. And so Monday was reserved for a refresh opportunity for that. And so if they do need to move past today, the next available launch opportunity, as we were told on Friday during a pre-launch briefing with the members of the press, that will be Tuesday. And then looking beyond that would be a launch opportunity on Wednesday. I was We are currently T-minus 55 minutes, 45 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. We will talk all of our normal things like trajectory, and for those who aren't with us for the countdown timeline, we'll go over some of those particulars with the Falcon 9 rocket. But in just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by our friend, Mr. Patrick O'Neill, with the ISS National Lab to dig into some of the science that they are sponsoring heading up to the orbiting outpost on this mission, and perhaps even tease ahead to a little bit that's coming up on CRS-31 later this year. You'll just have to stick around and find out. We are going to be doing that live interview again in the next couple of minutes, just getting set up for that. Before we do, want to welcome Ellie Johnson to channel membership at the pad leader level, and thank our pre-existing channel member Mark Otto for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. That is very much appreciated. And as a reminder, channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all the launch liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. So be sure to hit that like button, bring some more folks on into the fold, and we'll be right back with our live interview with Mr. Pat O'Neill with the ISS National Lab. Hello there and welcome back to our live coverage of the NG-21 mission, sending up a Cygnus spacecraft to the International Space Station. It's going to be a roughly 2-day journey once the Falcon 9 rocket leaves Pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So you can see just over my shoulder, we are just under 48 minutes from liftoff, and as you can also see beside me, we're joined by a wonderful guest. As I teed up just a moment ago, this is Pat O'Neill, friend of the channel, and most importantly for our conversation today with the ISS National Lab and able to talk to us about some of the science that's launching on this mission. Pat, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Wow. I'll tell you what, that's a lot to live up to, so I better do well.
Oh, well, you never disappoint, so I can't imagine you will today. Lots of science, you know, that usually goes up on these Cygnus and Dragon spacecraft, but a lot in particular that's being sponsored by the ISS National Lab with this mission. For those who didn't have the opportunity, there was a webinar a week ago Friday. If you want to really go ahead and drill down super deep with some of the researchers that are sending up their payloads, we'll include a link in the live notes in the description box for this video. But Pat, if you can give us sort of a broad overview, and then we'll talk more in particular about some of the experiments, but give us just sort of a general sense of the flavor of what's heading up.
Well, the flavor on this one is very diversified. So we have life sciences, physical sciences, we have technology demonstrations, we have student experiments, which is pretty much exactly what you want for every single time we're going to be resupplying the space station. So again, NG-21 is again a great representation on the diversity of experimentation that's possible on the space station.
And so, speaking of diversity, there's of course plant science, there's some, you know, printing, there's technology demonstrations. One of the ones that jumped out at me that you and the researchers talked about was a stem cell experiment that's, you know, and I'm going to overly simplify this dramatically, so, you know, pull me back and bring us more into the actual science, but it was broadly described as being able to take someone's skin cells and then almost reverse time on them, bring them back to those basic stem cells, and then do some research on an almost individualized basis, right?
Yeah, so that's certainly something we're seeing a lot of from a biomedical perspective. I believe the payload you're talking about is from Cedars-Sinai, who has a very pronounced history in supporting a lot of different research on the space station. This one's interesting because, to your point, it's stem cells, but it actually has the ability to maybe look at things down the road for heart disease or neurodegenerative issues, and so their team is specifically looking at like in-space production applications. How can we use the space environment to ultimately create more effective therapeutics and then bring those therapeutics back down to patients on Earth? So this is not their first foray into launching investigations to the station, so they are tried, tested, and true. They're actually funded through a NASA in-space production applications grant opportunity, but they are still sponsored by the ISS National Lab. So it just goes to show that both NASA and the ISS National Lab have a very vested interest in using the space station for manufacturing capabilities for benefits here on Earth.
And we were talking before we came outside about the ongoing partnership between the ISS National Lab and the National Science Foundation, who's also, you know, investing in a lot of the science that's heading up. Can you talk about sort of how that partnership works, the importance of having them as a partner funding some of the work, and what that then allows, you know, your team at the National or the ISS National Lab to conduct?
Great question, yes. So we've had a very long-standing relationship with the National Science Foundation. To date, they have awarded or funded more than 70 projects that are all planning to go to the International Space Station. Each year we have 2 different grants that are put forth. One of them is focused on tissue engineering. One of them is focused on fluid dynamics and transport phenomena. So on this mission, we have 3 different transport phenomena investigations that are launching. But the reason why this matters is because the National Science Foundation is focused on funding fundamental research, really kind of getting to the baseline of scientific knowledge that could eventually lead towards more applied measures, and whether that be here on the ground or in space. And the reason that matters for us through the ISS National Lab is by having NSF fund these fundamental payloads, we can now focus funding efforts on more applied measures. So as I mentioned, Cedars-Sinai, that was something that's, again, looking at a little bit more applied measures. Or if there's opportunities for us to engage with pharmaceutical companies that are doing research on the space station, looking at enhanced therapeutics. So, you know, we have this fundamental area, this pathway that NSF is very important in.
sort of focusing on, honing up, yeah.
And then it allows for us, again, to focus our efforts a little bit on those applied measures for other types of R&D.
Gotcha. And, you know, we also teased ahead that obviously this is not the only mission that's going to be launching science backed by the ISS National Lab. Also got your eyes a little bit down the road on CRS-31 the next time a Dragon cargo spacecraft flies. Can you give us a little bit of hint of what might be going up on that mission?
A lot of biomedical research. So I can't give away too much, but there is some big pharma that's going to be flying. There's also a lot of NSF-funded investigations that are flying on that one too. I think that as of right now, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5 NSF-funded projects. So again, it just really shows that there's a lot of efforts from NSF to support research on station. There's going to be some more tech demos. There's going to be additional in-space production concepts that are going to be flying. So again, looking forward to what's going to be happening in the next couple of months as far as R&D on the space station and the work that the astronauts get to support.
And just lastly, choosing among children, I know, but is there maybe 1 or 2 experiments that's flying up with this mission that you're especially jazzed to see, be executed?
Good question. We chatted a little bit earlier about this Madison Square Garden group. So everyone likes pictures, whether that be of the astronauts living and working in space or just the space in its entirety. The Madison Square Garden group, they have partnered with Sphere Entertainment. Yes, that's the same Sphere from Las Vegas. They've already sent 1 camera to the space station to just kind of get a sense of how their technology will react in the extreme environment of space. They're going to be launching a new camera called Big Sky on this mission, and they're excited to kind of see what happens with that one because they have yet another one that will be coming down the pipeline hopefully in 2025. So to me, that's going to be exciting just because the types of imagery that could be taken from that and how that's going to be shared with the general public, giving people an idea of the types of things that are happening on the space station and just the general excitement that comes from doing research in space or just being in that space environment.
Well, Pat, thanks so much, and we'll look forward to seeing this mission fly, hopefully in just a little more than 41 minutes. And so, of course, we'll be having much more live coverage throughout the duration of this countdown. So stay right here with Spaceflight Now. We'll be back in a moment with some more commentary. We are currently T-minus 35 minutes and counting. Assuming all is still moving on track, SpaceX should be getting into prop load right now. As of now, we have not had a more recent statement within the hour mark, and we have now gone red for weather. There is a violation due to an attached anvil cloud. Depending on the timing and the track, of course, that can be cleared if they are confident in that. Again, fueling needed to have started 1 minute ago, so we are awaiting updates on the start of prop load from we are currently T-minus 32 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. We are still awaiting word from NASA or SpaceX that fueling has begun, but we are, as of this moment in time, not seeing any visual signs that liquid oxygen is being flowed on board the tanks on the Falcon 9's first stage. Actually, just taking a closer look at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, it does appear that we are starting to see some vapor. Yep, we're definitely seeing some vapor forming near the base of the first stage. So propellant load, by visual estimation, has begun. No official word from SpaceX, but it does visually appear that liquid oxygen is being loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. currently T-minus 28 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. So we were going back and reviewing some communication between Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station. There was a note that was relayed from Capcom up to Matt Dominic on the ISS, in which they said that they're working the status of the mission. They said weather looking a little bit better, about 60% chance of a violation, so a little bit improved from what we were previously reporting of 35, now up to 40% favorable. But they also said, and I'll quote here, the spacecraft is working a leak issue, so we'll see where we're at in probably another 30 minutes or so, end quote. That was about 15-ish minutes ago, so in about the next 15 or so minutes, we may hear another update on that. And of course, we will keep you apprised of how that progresses. Just as a broader context note, it's unclear if the potential issue may be with the Cygnus spacecraft or with the Falcon 9 rocket. So again, just want to couch that in. There's still a bit of uncertainty on that, but just wanted to let you know that they are working what Mission Control Houston told Matt Dominic on station was, quote, the spacecraft working a leak issue, end quote. So again, we are currently T-minus 27 minutes and counting. Fueling of the Falcon 9 is in progress, and we will keep you apprised on any and all updates on the issue as it develops. For now, we are T-minus 26 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. On the nominal timeline for this mission, cryogenic helium would have been loaded on board the pressure vessels on the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket at about the T-minus 30-minute mark, and we're approaching that process beginning on the second stage now, again assuming all is moving along on schedule. Currently T-minus 20 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. We are coming upon the start of visually the so-called big vent. There you see that venting beginning now. An indication that from a fueling standpoint, things are continuing to proceed. We're about 4 minutes away from the start of second stage LOX load, liquid oxygen loading on board the Falcon 9's second stage. Currently T-minus 18 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. Or the call at stage 2 RP1 load is complete. Currently T-minus 17 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. Positive trend for the weather outlook. They are green on the board for weather. About 45 seconds left on the big vent prior to second stage LOX load, starting at T-minus 16 minutes. Currently T-minus 15 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. Currently T-minus 14 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. Let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket will be heading once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Following liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40, or Slick 40, over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, because this is a mission sending its payload to catch up to the ISS, it will be heading in a northerly trajectory, northeasterly path, following that green line there. The red line is for the first stage booster, which will perform a boost back burn and flip around, heading back towards a landing over at Landing Zone 1 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This particular first stage booster that is flying today, tail number 1080, is going to be making its 10th flight on this mission, and the 4th time it's supporting a payload heading up to the orbiting outpost. A little bit further downrange along this trajectory, the payload fairings will be separated from the Falcon 9 upper stage, and they will splash down in the Atlantic Ocean and will be recovered by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort. This is what it looks like as they're bringing the fairing half back on board one of their recovery vessels. This captured last year. Taking a look here at the Falcon 9 rocket from the perspective of the pad there. See here a breakdown of the Falcon 9 rocket. Again, the Falcon 9 first stage supporting this mission is B1080. Some of its previous missions include a pair of flights for Axiom Space based in Houston, sending up the AX-2 mission and Crew Dragon Freedom twice today. Looking at Landing Zone 1 here, where the booster will land following stage separation and it comes back to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Taking a look at some video of the Cygnus spacecraft as it was being processed here at the Kennedy Space Center. Again, the Cygnus will be bringing up about 8,200 pounds of science and supplies to the International Space Station once it arrives. It's the process of loading some of that cargo on board. The Cygnus is not designed to survive re-entry, so once it departs the International Space Station, it will be loaded up with trash and other unnecessary items from the ISS decoupled from the space station and sent back into the atmosphere where it will burn up. It'll take roughly 2 days following this moment you're seeing here from a previous Cygnus launch for the Cygnus to reach the International Space Station, where it will be captured by the Canadarm you see here on your screen, and then docked with the ISS, or berthed to the station. And as we were just talking about, once it's ready to depart, it'll be loaded with any unnecessary items that the space station no longer needs. It also serves the function of boosting the space station, as you can see here in this image captured during one of its burns. This is a time lapse of releasing the Cygnus from a prior mission. As you mentioned, it burns up as it comes back through the atmosphere. Currently T-minus 8 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. SpaceX commentator says for now they remaining go for launch. We are just about a minute away from the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. Taking a look at our live chat, I want to thank the more than 6,800 of you who are watching with us live this morning. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. Allows more folks to find their way into our live coverage. Certainly appreciate it. Also want to thank a couple folks for supporting our live launch coverage directly. Thanks to Tim Martin with a $4 super chat saying my son and I are watch newbies. Really appreciate you being with us for your first launch. Hope you enjoy the broadcast. Mike Dewar marking 8 months as a channel member at the pad leader level. Appreciate you sticking with us, Mike. Who says good morning, Clisty Lee, Mark Otto, Will, and everyone else here. Greetings from Titusville. One of the benefits of living here on the Space Coast is there are a number of spots from which you can watch rocket launch, all with varying views of good accessibility, obviously, assuming that the weather is cooperative wherever you are. Also want to thank SG for a $5 super chat as well. And finally, for now, I'll second the $5 super chat from Mel Roberts Harold, one of our wonderful channel members, saying, hit like, y'all. Certainly be appreciated. We're now T-minus 6 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. Engine chill down now in progress. SpaceX launch commentator notes that they are working, quote, no significant issues. We recall that stage 1 RP1 load has been completed. Weather remains green for launch. Hear the call that we are preparing for a strong back retract here. See those clamp arms opening up underneath the payload fairings, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will pull back about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Strong back retract currently underway here at the pad, Space Launch Complex 40. Now just over 3 minutes away from the planned liftoff. Coming up on first stage liquid oxygen loading being complete. We have not heard any more about the so-called spacecraft leak issue, but as we did hear from a SpaceX commentator just minutes ago, they were, quote, working no significant issues. So by all accounts at this point in time, call off for stage 1 LOX load being complete. We are proceeding to the final roughly 2.5 minutes before the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Again, this is an instantaneous launch window. So SpaceX, NASA, Northrop Grumman aiming for that 11:02 a.m. Eastern, 15:02 UTC liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. Of course, because SpaceX has already started fueling, even if they had a larger window, they would be locked into their current T0 once fueling has begun, regardless. If for whatever reason in the next 2 minutes an issue crops up, the next launch opportunity for SpaceX and this mission will be on Tuesday, August 6th at 10:18 a.m. Eastern. Now less than 2 minutes to plan launch. We did just hear the call for stage 2 LOX load wrapping up. Falcon 9 now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Cygnus spacecraft also on internal power now. It will separate from the Falcon 9 upper stage a little more than 14.5 minutes after liftoff. Falcon 9 about to come into startup about 5 seconds from now. Do you hear that call? In about 5 more seconds, we're anticipating the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch call. And we are go for launch per the SpaceX launch director. The range is clear for launch. We are now just 30 seconds away from the liftoff of the NG-21 mission. "20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and the NG-21 mission heading up to the International Space Station. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Because the booster is returning to landing zone 1, there are going to be 5 events happening fairly quickly, one to another. First stage management cutoff is about T plus 2 minutes and 18 seconds, followed 4 seconds later by stage separation. The second stage engine will begin its burn about 2.5 minutes into flight. The boost back burn will start 5 seconds later, and then the payload fairings will be deployed just before the 3-minute mark. The boost back burn will conclude about 3 minutes 24 seconds into flight. Hear the call that the Falcon 9 following a nominal trajectory so far.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
Stage 1 boost back startup.
And all good call-outs from SpaceX as you were hearing on your screen.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there we heard.
Call out for fairing separation as well. While we didn't see it, you can actually see the fairings falling away now on the right-hand side of your screen. You can see the Merlin vacuum engine flying the shorter nozzle configuration. When the Falcon 9's second stage doesn't quite need as much oomph, they're able to use this shorter nozzle configuration of the Merlin vacuum engine, which is a more cost-effective and cheaper iteration of this engine. You can see the hypersonic grid fins now being deployed on the Falcon 9's first stage. The boost back burn has concluded. There will be a couple more burns of the Falcon 9 first stage as it makes its way back towards Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Now more than 4 minutes into flight. Those puffs that you're seeing in between the hypersonic grid fins, those are the cold gas thrusters helping to adjust the attitude of the vehicle. You can see the altitude of the first stage booster is also decreasing, so we've passed its apogee. Speed still increasing, but that will, of course, slow down dramatically once the first stage entry burn begins. You can see actually looking at the upper stage engine just to its left, well, now beneath it in this angle, you can see what appears to be Tropical Storm Debbie actually making its way towards Florida. If what I'm seeing is what I believe we're seeing from this angle. That storm, of course, set to make landfall as a hurricane at the Big Bend section of the Sunshine State. Now more than 5.5 minutes into flight, the start of the first stage entry burn is coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 17 seconds. Coming up on the call for the first stage entry burn beginning.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Here, you heard that call. Our ground team tracking that entry burn coming in. Brent P. Carson's with Max Q Productions, first to get an eye on it. That burn now concluded. You can see that booster making its way back down towards landing zone 1. This booster coming in for its 10th landing to date, having most recently flown on June 20th of this year. Start of that landing burn. Landing legs have deployed, and a good landing of the Falcon 9 first stage at LZ1. And with the clouds hanging around, a spectacular sonic boom to cap it off. This mission marked the 335th landing of a first stage booster. This was also the 42nd landing at LZ1 and the 53rd booster landing here in the state of Florida. Now, because this is a fairly short mission and one where NASA is the customer, along with Northrop Grumman, of course, we will continue having onboard views until spacecraft separation. So stick right here as we continue to track the progress of the Falcon 9 second stage. We look for the departure of the Cygnus spacecraft. Do your call out for nominal orbital insertion. We're now 9 minutes and some change into flight. The Cygnus spacecraft will be deployed at T plus 14 minutes, 35 seconds. Got some views of the Cygnus spacecraft now live from the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. Again, deployment of the spacecraft will happen at T plus 14 minutes, 35 seconds, give or take a few seconds. That will begin the Cygnus solo flight that will last roughly 2 days as it makes its journey up to the orbiting outpost, getting ready to be received by NASA astronauts Matt Dominic and Jeanette Epps. On board the Cygnus spacecraft are about 8,200 pounds of cargo and supplies heading up to the Expedition 71 astronauts. Taking a live look at the pad there on the right-hand side of your screen, of course. Fortunately, devoid of a rocket. We went from a 10% chance of good weather for launch today, increased to 40, and that 40 was good enough to thread the needle, and the Cygnus is very soon to be on its way by itself heading up to the ISS. As we continue to track the progress of the Falcon 9 upper stage, I want to thank a couple folks for their support this late morning now. Thanks to Kevin Johnson for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Kevin. Greg Jazz Jr. with a $2 super chat as well, saying go SpaceX go. And a $5 super chat and some hippo applause from SG. Thank you, SG. This particular Cygnus spacecraft, as is the case with its predecessors, is named for an explorer who is no longer with us. This particular first Cygnus spacecraft, I should say, named the SS Richard Dick Scobie, the pilot of STS-41C and, of course, the commander of STS-51L, among those who unfortunately perished during the Challenger disaster on January 28th, 1986. And so the spacecraft named in his honor. We are now just about 2 minutes away from the deployment of the Cygnus spacecraft. We're now T plus 13 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Less than a minute away from the deployment of the Cygnus spacecraft from the Falcon 9 upper stage. Now about 10 seconds away from spacecraft deployment.
Should be hearing that call.
Cygnus deploy confirmed.
And with that, Cygnus is flying free, beginning a roughly 2-day journey to the International Space Station. It has about 40 hours of transit time. And again, NASA astronauts Matt Dominic and Jeanette Epps will be monitoring its journey and will be ready to capture and berth the spacecraft once it arrives at the space station. In roughly 2 hours and 15 minutes, the solar arrays on the Cygnus spacecraft will be deployed. That process, once it begins, will take a little more than 40 minutes. And that will help power the spacecraft as it makes its journey to the ISS. Going to listen into Bill Spetch talk for a moment about this mission.
Back on the previous 20 Cygnus vehicle launches to see just how much capability has been added to the vehicle to support the ISS mission. I had the privilege to be at the first commercial resupply services launch for Cygnus to ISS, and it is awesome seeing where we are today with this launch. I'm really excited that the weather cooperated with us to get this mission underway.
Bill, we're glad the weather cooperated too. If you would please outline for us the upcoming activities for the crew on board the station as they prepare for Cygnus's arrival early Tuesday.
So we get most of the items in place and checked out before we launch as part of our launch commit criteria. The crew has already done some practice runs on board for grappling Cygnus when it arrives. Closer to the arrival, they will set up to monitor its approach to the capture point before ultimately grappling the spacecraft with the robotic arm.
And Bill, anytime a visiting vehicle arrives at the station, there's a choreography to unload the spacecraft. How complex is that process, and what factors contribute to it?
It does take a lot of planning and choreography to unload Cygnus. The team on the ground looks at a number of factors when addressing how the vehicle will be unloaded. First and foremost is we want to get going on all the time-critical science experiments that arrive on the vehicle. Those will be uploaded first to allow the crew to start conducting those experiments. The team must also take into account the available storage on board the ISS. This mission is delivering over 8,000 pounds of science, supplies, and hardware that takes up a lot of space. The team will stage what is retrieved from Cygnus in order to balance that with the available space inside the ISS. And finally, some of the hardware arriving will be installed on the ISS at planned times later during the mission. The teams account for all of these factors when planning how and when to unload the spacecraft.
All right, Bill Spetch, the Operations Integration Manager for the International Space Station Program. Thanks for joining us today.
And with the successful deployment of the Cygnus spacecraft, a good first stage booster landing back at LZ-1, we're going to go ahead and begin to wind down our live coverage by taking a look back now at the mission stats as they currently stand. This was the 10th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1080, the 360th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was the 75th Falcon 9 flight of 2024, the 304th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 76th orbital launch of 2024, if you include the Falcon Heavy launch, including on top of the 75 Falcon 9s. This was the 118th orbital launch for SpaceX within the last 365 days. The 198th orbital launch from Pad 40, their workhorse site. And this marked the 253rd overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Taking a look at the bar chart here, this is where SpaceX stacks up now as we continue to roll on in the month of August. Moving on to some recovery stats. With that booster landing at LZ-1, that was the 42nd time we've seen that operation there. It's the 53rd SpaceX landing here in the Sunshine State, the 72nd overall land landing, and the 335th overall SpaceX booster landing as well. Finally, some industry stats. This marked the 54th orbital launch from Florida this year, the 81st from U.S. soil, This was the 90th orbital launch from U.S. rocket company and the 143rd orbital launch from around the world. Looking ahead to the future here, we are keeping our eyes on another SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launch. We are, of course, anticipating additional Falcon 9 Starlink launches from Florida in the days to come. However, given the one-day slip of this mission and the impacts to weather, we will continue to keep an eye on that and, of course, let you know when new launches are on the books and when to expect them and where to expect them, of course, as well. For all that and more, you can keep up with the very latest on our website, spaceflightnow.com, and check out the launch schedule tab. Want to thank our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs for providing tracking views of the rocket today. Our Adam Bernstein as well, joining us with tracking views, and Michael Kane getting some still photography of the rocket as well. Look on their social channels as well as ours for additional photos from today's launch. You can find our photographers, Adam at Apron NYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. Be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. Our thanks to the moderators in the live chat for helping to hold it down today, keep things kosher, and allow everyone to have an enjoyable time during our live launch coverage. So thanks to Stephanie B. and Callistia Lee for helping us out today. Our thanks as well to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. And most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you are watching this live launch coverage from. If you happen to catch it live, or if you're watching this right now on a replay. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. Until then, bye-bye.